Welcome back. Now, for many of us, the most enduring elements of the endurance story is the iconic photography captured by Frank Hurley, the Australian photographer or camera artist. And we're very pleased to welcome a dual presentation this morning from Dr. Jan Pomereu of Salto Ulbeck Publishers and also Meredith Hooper. Jan has been working for a number of years for a special project where they're basically printing and preserving the photography of Frank Hurley's images from the endurance expedition. And so Jan, welcome Jan, good to see you again.
Thank you very much, Seamus. Thank you for
So Jan is going to take us through this morning the extraordinary project embarked upon by his company, Salto Ulbeck, over the last couple of years in relation to the preservation and the reprinting of these iconic images from the endurance exhibition. And later on, Meredith Hooper will join us to talk about the history behind that project as well, and the history of Hurley himself as a camera artist.
Thank you, Seamus. Thank you for providing this opportunity. I should start by saying that Salto Ulbeck is a company based in Belgium. I actually collaborate with the company. It's not my company. The company belongs to a gentleman who is called Georges Chardier, who is a master printer and has been for 20, 30, 40 years. And he's really always worked at the forefront of combining modern technology with ancient photographic techniques. And the studio, which you can see here, is based in a place called Ulbeck, a little village about an hour east of Brussels. Georges has been working with some of the great contemporary photographers that are working today, including, I'm just showing you a couple of quick examples, George Tice, who is an American photographer and who's documented American life, and also Nick Brandt, whose work focuses on Africa and wildlife. Now, Salto Ulbeck does many things in terms of modern technology, and as I said, combining that with older photographic techniques. And one of its specialties is platinum printing, platinum palladium printing. These two metals are mixed, and the concentration of either the differentiation in the combination of both metals will give you a warmer image or a cooler image. It's a black and white technique, and it was called the Prince of all media by the great American photographer Alfred Stieglitz. I don't want to get too bogged down on photographic technique, but I should point out some of the strength of platinum palladium printing, which is an expanded tonal range and three-dimensionality to the image. It also has a unique luminous and painterly quality, which is really surpasses that of silver prints. And the difference being, when we say platinum palladium printing, we are using platinum and palladium salts as a photosensitive material instead of silver, which is of course also beautiful and can be indeed some astounding prints, but has the disadvantages of being more fragile and with time and of fading, and certainly doesn't have that necessarily have that luminous quality of platinum palladium. Also, with platinum printing, the solution is embedded in the paper; it's absorbed by the paper, which means that the image is really contained within it. Whereas many silver prints, the solution is actually contained in a gelatine film that sits on top of the paper. And it's also amongst one of the most permanent objects created by man. A platinum palladium print, platinum is more stable than gold, and certainly more stable than silver, and so will stand the test of time over centuries, if not millennia. So when we think of the original negatives of great masters of photography, the negatives are silver-based, they will fade. The prints is ultimately what will remain, these prints. Some of the difficulties, however, it's not all positive, are obtaining the deepest blacks can be challenging in platinum printing. Salto Ulbeck has worked on that and actually does what's called double coating in order to attain richer blacks. It's also very pricey because depends on the use of platinum, which is more expensive than gold. And one of the problems also is the variability of price of platinum. Like gold, it fluctuates a great deal, and because it's very expensive. And so platinum printing has actually come in and out of favor based on the cost of the primary material. So how did we get into archival work and eventually to the Hurley portfolio, which I'm here to talk about? It goes back more than a decade. Spry had purchased the original negatives of Herbert Ponting from the Terra Nova expedition. And I was working at Spry at the time, or rather studying. And I was also a photographer. I worked with Georges on my own photography with Salto Ulbeck. And this idea arose of doing something that hadn't been done before, which is printing Ponting's work using this medium, and to go further and actually produce a portfolio that would really take a new look and reposition Ponting's photography straight and center as a photographic work. It's not, and not seeing it as an illustration to a story necessarily, but saying, look, he was a master photographer, and his primary issue, or his primary goal, was perhaps to take the best photographs possible and to really revere to that. And so we knew that he had done excellent prints himself with I forget the name now, sorry, it will come back to me anyway, but he'd done some beautiful carbon prints shortly after coming back from for the Art Society, I'm sorry. Shortly after coming back from Antarctica, he'd also given a whole set of prints to the royal household, George V, and so the question was, well, does he need reprinting using these sort of high-end techniques? Because carbon printing is a very high-end form of printing. And actually, we thought that what was interesting was that even in the photographs that he donated to the royal household, he was very selective. And for example, he didn't give any portraits. Portraits were not part and parcel of what was printed with the Art Society. He focused on landscapes. For example, all the photographs inside Cape Evans were not really included in his selections. So there was a revisiting was worthwhile. And so we structured this portfolio into 5 sections, 2 sets of portraits, 2 sections focusing on series of portraits, one on Cape Evans, life within Cape Evans, one on the Terra Nova, so really photographs of the ship in the ice, and then the other 5th called Antarctica, which was really focusing on landscape. And these were accompanied by essays, and I will just go through these sections. So this is the section Terra Nova, this is the landscape and wildlife section. And they were accompanied by essays by people like Ranulph Fiennes, William Fox, who's a scholar based in the States, and others. And it was really, so that here we have a project that encompasses archival preservation through the printing, quality of photographic representation, and editorial value. So it goes in. This then led to another project when the Scott Polar Research Institute purchased the negatives of Captain Scott, which had disappeared, and there were only a few postcard size images left, one of each of his, but there was 113 postcard size prints of the photographs that he'd taken after having been trained by Ponting. And here we adopted a different approach. We actually created a platinum printed bound book, which is about 120 pages long or in length, and which includes about 30 full-page prints of Captain Scott's photographs taken during the Terra Nova and on the way to the South Pole, as well as an index which comprises every image that he took, so all 113. And then again, this is really something that has a real archival importance in actually registering and bringing to light Captain Scott's photography in a thoughtful and aesthetically very high-end or very pleasing way. And the bound book was chosen because Scott did not consider himself a master photographer, was clearly not a master photographer, but nevertheless his photographs are profound and very actually more and more interesting as he learned and practiced, and very moving. So here it is, and here is one of the double spreads we have in the book. There are 4 panoramas in all, which he took, which we recombined to produce these beautiful panoramas. And we go very far. You can see that the way that the pages unfold doesn't have a crease. It's actually one piece of paper. So it's all about really the aesthetic quality. Okay, I've spoken too long on all of this, and really, but as a means of introduction. But here today is really to speak about our latest project, which is a co-edition with the Royal Geographical Society and the Scott Polar Research Institute, and which is focusing on Hurley's photographs from the Endurance expedition. So this is the first time, in many ways, that the collections of the RGS, which is the majority of the negatives, about two-thirds to three-quarters, and the SPRI, Scott Polar Research Institute collection, historically they were separated, have been brought together really in a book that isn't their primary, or in a portfolio or a project that isn't their primary to tell the story, of course, although the story, of course, is central and is the background, but it's to put the photography, to put the photography back at the top, if you will, and to let the story be a backdrop rather than the forefront of what we're trying to do. And this is again really thinking of Hurley as a photographer. He was his primary intention, or I mean, although they were manifold, clearly there was also an aspect of his work was to make money on returning from the expedition and actually help fund the expedition and clear the debt. But certainly when he was behind his camera, his primary goal was to compose striking images. And so the approach we took here, I'll go through the portfolio quickly, was to select loose leaf, select images which he took prior to the sinking of the ship, at the time when he was still using glass plates, and to print those as loose leaf prints which sit in the portfolio. And there are 68 of those, and they are ordered in chronologically. Here you can see them, and they tell the story of the Endurance up to the time when the ship was abandoned and was seen to finally sink from the camp. So these 68 prints are, as I said, are all loose-leafed. In a way, they're an exhibition into themselves, and they really aim to show sort of the grandiose, the sublime, the mastery of his work. You'll see that Hurley is also on the front of the box. There's a self-portrait of him in polar gear, and it contains 3 sections. So it contains the section I've just described, which are the loose prints. It contains a separate booklet, which is an essay by Meredith Hooper, who will speak hopefully straight after me, and then the third section is actually a bound book, a bit like the Scott book, which focuses on the photographs which he took after the sinking of the Endurance, when he switched cameras, and he stopped taking, because they were burdensome, he stopped taking glass plate negatives. Famously, he selected those he wanted of the ones he'd already taken. He made a selection that he then took with him for the rest of the journey, and then he switched to a Kodak vest pocket camera, which was a far small negative celluloid, and there his style changes into a sort of photo reportage mode, which is actually in some ways comparable to Scott's photography. It was no longer a question of documenting the sublimity of Antarctica or of in a way, in cinematic terms of creating a grand images. It was just documenting survival, and that's very different. And thereby those images are contained in this bound book, which represents the third section of the portfolio, and which are printed alongside excerpts of his diary. So we really let his voice take forth, and it's really about Hurley's voice more than Shackleton's or more than other expedition members. This is the book, and I will show you a few spreads from the book section. So this is the opening of the book when when they're at Ocean Camp, and they keep going back to, as you all know, trips back to the Endurance as it gets crushed by the ice. So this is actually an index which is contained in the first section alongside the essay by Meredith Hooper, which shows all of the images that were selected as loose leaf prints, 68 of them. So I'm just skipping through those. And then these are the images that are contained in the book, the bound book, so after the sinking of the ship. And we call the bound book "We Are Homeless." So "We Are Homeless," I'll take you through a few of the spreads from that section of the portfolio, to give you an idea of. You have to imagine that these pages fold in the middle, so they open up. And you're seeing left and right page. And here some pages, so it's all about rhythm and creating a sort of almost a meditative immersion into the photography, into the expedition through his words, through the combination of we spend a lot of time thinking about simplicity, but simplicity is hard to come by, and really putting his images forth in the strongest possible fashion. The image on the left actually is of the James Caird being raised, is actually from the National Library of Australia, as the only photograph in the portfolio that's not from the RGS or Spry. And here are other examples. And again, we never crop the images. We keep Hurley's compositions intact. And this is the end of the book. And here I am showing you the first section of the book, which combines Meredith Hooper's essay, and which also has these two reproductions, which are at the Scott Polar, where you have these two iconic images signed around from the albums that Hurley made. And here these are the only reproductions that are actually not from original negatives, but from pages in the album. So thank you. That was a bit of a whistle tour of many years' work, and it'd be wonderful to be able to maybe one day come and actually present the real thing in Athi. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. That was wonderful. I mean, it makes you want more, actually. You see a few of those images as well.
Yeah,
Meredith can't make it with us today, unfortunately, so we're going to end up around this, but we have time for just about 2 or 3 questions. I'll just throw them on the screen there for you. The first question is from Jan Kozecki.
okay. Sorry, I'll go back to full screen.
So
yes, I can't actually see it. I'm sorry.
Okay, so he says here, I have seen the endurance set at RGS and they're truly amazing. Congrats. I gather platinum is not applicable for color. Is there anything comparable for dealing with color images?
So it's color carbon printing, which is something that George and Salterbeck is trying to master right now. Well, it does master it, but not to the level it would like to. So this is really cutting edge in terms of printing. And there's research being done right now into mastering color carbon printing, which basically combines real pigments in a sort of gelatine form, and which, in theory, the ultimate idea would be to be able to reproduce negatives and to actually have a perfect transcription of color from the negative to the paper. But that's a long answer to a quick question. No, there isn't at the moment something that equates the advantages of platinum that I had with black and white photography in color. Color is still very unstable, and I mean, not to say you can't get beautiful color prints, but nothing attains the stability and the efficacy and the restitution of color in the same way that platinum restitutes tonality and then of course has the longevity advantages.
Okay, we have time for one last question from Susan Ingram. How many total glass plates and celluloid plates survived that he rescued from the sinking Endurance? That's about Hurley, of course.
So there's about 200, just over 200 negatives between the RGS and Spry. He famously threw away something like, I need to be checked, but he famously threw hundreds of plates away when he had to select when he had to lighten up, of course, for the journey towards Elephant Island. There would probably be around 600 negatives that he would have taken during the expedition, of which just over 200 survive. And these combine, there's about 1/3 which are celluloids. Well, no, an interesting fact. So when he stopped using glass plates, because when they left Ocean, well, at Ocean Camp they combined. He still combined glass plate photography with celluloid Kodak Vest Pocket photography, and then when they left Ocean Camp, that was it. He really had to just use. He was only left with his pocket camera, and he only had 5 rolls of film at that point. So he was very limited, and he had to be very careful about, not snapping away too quickly, because that's all he had. So
that's fantastic, Jan. Thanks very much for your contribution. I hope we keep that pledge and come to a time maybe next year, the year after.
Yeah, it would be great.
It would be fantastic.
Yeah, it would be great to be able to show the real thing. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Jan. We'll talk to you again.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. And now I'm going to introduce Kevin to introduce our next contribution from David Herzl and Brad Borkin. And don't forget to refresh your screens, of course.